How agile is your work culture? Especially when there's something, a market condition, employees, regulations, and policies that changes daily. And how does this consistent barrage of change affect your company's performance? My guest today on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast helps us understand how to achieve the best organizational effectiveness in the midst of rapid change. He's worked with local, state, and federal government agencies, several branches of the nation's military, and human rights organizations around the world. Plus, he holds numerous certifications, including from SHRM. So get ready for information and inspiration you can implement starting today on the Work Positive Podcast.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Joey Fawcett. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Work Positive Nation, help me welcome to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. You can look at our hairlines if you're on YouTube or on our website and tell we are related. We were separated for my new best friend, my long-lost brother, Dr. Anthony Wade. Anthony, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, Joey.
It my pleasure to have you on. It really is. Man, when I read through your accomplishments, I want to be your brother. You have done so much. What are some of the, and I know you're going to tell me, because I know you now after having been in the green room with you for about 30 minutes, you're going to be very humble about this. But what are some of the, because you have so many achievements, what are some of the experiences that you had along the way to these achievements that you can say, hey, Joey, these are really formative in who I am today?
Well, I would say that, number one, it all starts at home. I had a set of incredible parents, and I came from a poor background. We discussed it earlier. But they taught me things that mattered, a sense of pride, a strong work ethic, the ability to reflect integrity and honor all the time, and to be concerned with the well-being of others. If you can put others before yourself, then that'll be a life well lived, and let others be your legacy. And don't focus on creating a legacy. Let others be your legacy. And I just thought those were words to live by. And along the way, I had some great leaders, both civilian and military, who left me with lessons of wisdom. One of them was an individual who told me, actually a general, who made the comment that when you've got a group of individuals in a room, put that particular question on the floor, and then you be the last one to speak. Allow other people to speak before you do, especially if you're the senior ranking person in a room, because that allows them to offer their unfiltered opinions as opposed to trying to tailor them to reflect your particular slant. And I found that works well both in the civilian world as well as in the military world. Another piece, again, reflected what my family gave to me, which was always the team first. If you take care of your people, will take care of your mission. And though those are words to live by, and sometimes leaders and supervisors and managers gets lost in the shuttle. But if they can ever remember that, then that's the epitome of what creates a great leader. And last but not least, in addition to putting others first, always be humble. So those are things I've learned along the way, and all the things that people reflect as accomplishments of mine pale by comparison to the wisdom that I've received from others. And some of those folks have been older than I have been, and some of them have been younger. But I have a philosophy that I'm looking for wisdom wherever I can find it.
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes we are mentored, and then sometimes reverse mentoring happens, right?
There you go. There you go.
Can teach us. I love that first point you made, because it seems to me so often leaders, and that can be C-suite leaders or managers, leaders want to prove how much they know.
Right.
And there seems to me there's a certain insecurity that drives that. How do you recommend to leaders that they check their ego, which I think also feeds the humility quotient, that they check their ego and are at a place where they want to actively listen, be empathetic, the kinds of things that positive work cultures are based on. How do they check their ego?
In talking with CEOs, whether they be in higher ed or public, private, nonprofit, for-profit sectors, I still, and I tell that story, the one that I just shared, I tell that story to them. Said, as a leader, you're already at the top of the food chain. You're already at the top of the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And as such, now what your role is one where you're empowering those throughout the organization to be the best they can be, to bring their A game to work every day, to contribute cognitive diversity in terms of their thoughts, in terms of innovative ideas, all those things that actually help to shift an organization in a positive and constructive way. And those individuals free to do that when the signal you send from the top is open door policy. That's not just coming to my office. If you see me in the hallway, if you see me out in one of our geographically separated locations, the bottom line is, if you have that type of spirit, and that's something that you not only articulate, but that you live, you will find that individuals will give you the best that they got. And in reality, most of the wisdom about how to improve organizations is generally not top down. It's normally bottom up. And the reason for that is you have individuals who are out there all the time. They're where the rubber meets the road. They're actually doing the work. And as such, their knowledge and their expertise goes a long way if we can get them to share it with us. And I've been in rooms when my team and I were talking, I'd put something out on the table and I'd be the last one to speak. I would encourage others to give me their best ideas first. And something, in a number of cases, in fact, in a lot of cases, some of the wisdom that came from the table was actually better than the path that I was going to travel down. And I was humble enough to say, yeah,
you're kidding. I actually had something to say.
Anybody who knows me well anybody who knows me well knows that's probably true. And what I would do was, humility is huge. Whenever that occurred, I would make a point of saying I was going in a different direction, but I like that idea. In fact, I think it's more effective. So I'm going to go in that direction. Not only does it allow us to be constructive, it puts the spotlight on the person who contributed it. It allows them to be valued. And it also sends the message to the rest of the team that your best game, your best thoughts, your best ideas are going to be valued by the leader of the group, whether that be a supervisor, manager, or CEO. And that's what we want. We want organizations to shift their cultures in a way that always shines a spotlight on the individual contributor so that she or he may be able to see how their efforts and their contributions not only impact their work unit or their division or the department, but they can actually see in a line of sight relationship between what they're doing and the strategic goals and objectives of the organization.
Which creates the ultimate relationship of belonging for an individual within an organization, right? When I can see my daily task, how they contribute to the accomplishment of the mission, then I am loyal. I bring my whole self to work. I feel included. I belong at that point, right?
That's exactly right. And that has multiple benefits. It promotes attracting talent because let's face facts. It doesn't matter how much we spend on outreach by social media, print, broadcast media. The best advertisement we're going to ever have in terms of attracting talent is a satisfied employee. Because those folks have credibility that Anthony Wade doesn't have, that the CEO of an organization doesn't have, because they're interacting with others who are similar to them. And they're telling those folks, you need to come to my organization. You'll be valued, you'll be treated well, you'll be able to be an active contributor. And we find that things like that contribute to that positive workforce culture. It allows attracting talent. It increases attracting talent. It minimizes attrition. It fosters productivity. And we could go on and on and on. So.
Yeah, and all of those go right to the bottom line, because when you reduce team turnover, you're no longer having to train, spend all that money recruiting. You're not a part of the
That's right.
$550 billion lost by American companies each year due to high attrition rates. And when
That's exactly right.
you've attracted top talent to your company, and that top talent knows other top talent and are saying, hey, you need to come work with us here. That's golden.
Yeah,
you
sure.
can't buy that.
Absolutely. Normally, sharp people normally hang out with other sharp people. You are what your environment is. And again, if they're singing praises about your organization, that helps out human resources in ways that are priceless. You can't put a price tag on it. And it helps the organization. Yeah.
It really does. So in the midst of that, let's say that I, as a leader, whether I'm an HR leader or CEO, I'm working towards that style of leadership where I value others, I respect others, I want them to belong. I even want them to become. There's a demonstrated career pattern for advancement through there, and I'm developing them, willing to invest in them. Yeah. But in the midst of all that, Anthony, change is barraging me daily. I am inundated by tsunamis of, well, we did that yesterday, we can no longer do that because this changed, and this changed, and this changed. Everything from the software as a service I've been using to, you just name it, everything is changing. How in the world do I, as a leader, create a positive work culture that creates some sort of stable footing in the midst of all this change daily?
There are several ways you can go about doing it. One of them is, I would offer that before we make significant shifts in culture, that we have safe space conversations with our employees. Will be vested in the success of the organization if, again, they know that we value them as impact players, as individuals who are directly responsible for our success. And if we have safe space conversations with those individuals, there are times that they can help develop strategies, help recommend ways of fostering change inside an organization that doesn't create chaos, it doesn't upset the apple cart, as it were, and most importantly, allows them, because management has listened to what they've said, to actually be now their stakeholders who have a vested interest in the success of what's been proposed. It also goes back to, we're listening to the employees, that we value that bottom-up wisdom. And again, individuals like that, they will actually do a lot of the work for you. And we've got to, as leadership, we've got to learn how to collaborate. And that's something that normally we haven't trained individuals to do. And that's a piece that we might have to spend some staff development time in, training supervisors and managers and folks in the C-suite to actually embrace a leadership philosophy that allows collaboration and that fosters the contribution of others in support of our success. And if you create that in culture, even when you're going in a different direction, even if you have to go back and tell them why we decided to go in a different direction. If you've led with that type of mindset all along, with that type of heart all along, employees will say they came out and told us what they were going to do. And that allowed us to be valued because they cited why they were going in a different direction. But that does not mean that what we said didn't matter. This is the organization that I need to be a part of.
Yeah, they heard us. They made the best decision they could from talking with all of us. And so together we're going to go in this direction. Dr. Anthony Wade is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. In the show notes, just in case you're on the Peloton or walking the dog or something, in the show notes, you'll find his LinkedIn profile link. Go there, message him, ask him questions, tell him how much you appreciate his appearance on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Reach out to him if you have some consulting work or just a question that you want to talk to him about. So that's the best way to reach Dr. Anthony Wade. So let's get back to those safe space conversations. I like your descriptor. Let's say we're eavesdropping on a safe space conversation. What might we hear?
I would offer that most of the things that we'll hear are dependent upon how they're being facilitated. Whoever's selected to be that facilitator needs to allow for a little angst to be expressed, sometimes a little frustration. That's okay. That's okay. And in order for it to be, yeah. In order for it to be a safe space conversation, you have to allow for that. You also have to value that as well. And in doing so, if you're valuing it, that kind of dials back some of the frustration, because more often than not, that's probably something that individuals are not always going to be, they're not going to always expect. If they're allowed to vent, you can take away pieces of that, because normally in anyone's venting, there are probably truths that we can set aside and say, you highlighted this, and this. Those are good points. Does anyone else in the room had something to add to this, or are there pieces that are going on in other parts of the unit or other parts of the division or the department that might not be known by these individuals as some of the things that actually respond to what she or he is referencing. And so once again, we live with the expectation that there's going to be some level of frustration that's expressed. And what we want to do is receive that, take the aspects of it which are important, and put that in a place where we can come back to it later and hopefully build solutions around that. I'm the senior consultant for WPR Consulting LLC, which is a consulting firm out of Charlotte. And my consulting partner is Willie Ratchford. And he and I have been engaged with these types of conversations in local governments, in higher ed, and nonprofits. And in each one of those environments, which are different environments, you have similar types of experiences. And the way that you deal with that is very simple. You stick to that methodology. Receive conversation. More often than not, it's going to be offered constructively, but sometimes there may be frustration that's presented in a way that may not be as diplomatic as it can be. And those are the times where you take the kid gloves and you just turn it in a way that shows, again, we value that, we heard that, this is something that we can deal with right now. This may be something that I'll have to get back to you on, but trust me, I'll get back to you. I won't leave you hanging. And thank you for sharing your authentic voice and your thoughts.
And in that space, the person's affirmed for sharing, as they were.
Amen.
I love that.
Yes.
It could be shared in a more diplomatic way or a more diplomatic presentation. That's a nice way of saying it. Sometimes people get angry in these things, right? And they've been, I refer to it as brewing and stewing in these facilitated conversations. It takes a high level of emotional intelligence, as my friend Joshua Friedman would say. It takes a high level of emotional intelligence to be that non-anxious presence in those moments, to affirm the person, thank them. And I love the way you're talking about pulling a kernel of truth out of that, which means we wade through the emotions, which oftentimes are strong, to get to that truth. And then the opportunity for others to confirm what resonates about this with other persons. And that way I'm not alone in not only my viewpoint, but in my strong emotions. And so I feel heard. I belong to the organization at this point. So I love that process that thanks for sharing with us, safe space conversations. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in your work primarily with governments and nonprofits and government agencies and organizations? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing to creating a positive work culture today?
Say some of those are driven by, again, staff professional development, especially leadership level.
Okay.
In order for a culture to change, in order for it to be as positive as it can be, you've got to have leaders who, again, know how to lead with humility, aren't afraid to ask for feedback that allows that type of safe space conversation, and to manage those conversations in such a way that we pull out the pieces of information allow us to moderate the organization, modify the organization in a way that is the most positive, that contributes to the most positive outcome. Mm-hmm. That's a piece that supervisors and managers, they don't always succeed at that. And that's primarily because they haven't always been trained or educated like in that form of leadership. We tend to, as organizations, focus on the quick gains, the short-term rewards, and those types of things, not always understanding that and focusing on those particular elements that sometimes forces individuals in leadership, managerial, and supervisory levels to push staffs in a way that's not always good for the department or the section or the division. And if you're going, and not that can't occur, but if you're going to expect short-term results as well as long-term gains, then you have to prepare supervisors to be aware of their own internal biases in terms of doing things differently. Make them aware that employee collaboration is important. Wisdom can come from the staff. I guess it's not necessarily I'm the boss, do what I say. And if you can create a team dynamic where even though you're the leader, everyone knows he's right, he or she is right here with us. And if we see something as being important and other people don't, she or he is right here with us. They're right here in this foxhole with us. If somebody's taking shots, we are, to use a military term, he or he is right here in this foxhole taking shots and returning fire back. We're right here in lockstep. And that again builds incredible loyalty that you can't put a price tag on. And we've seen that happen across organizations where literally supervisors and leaders and other leaders in the organization haven't always been trained and developed to have that type of interaction and engagement with employees that are truly the backbone of the organization. And they're out there where the rubber meets the road, and they drive our success.
I love the distinction you're creating there between the short-term gain and the long-term gain. It seems like someone oftentimes winds up in a supervisory position because they were really good at a set of tasks.
Exactly.
Assume because they're really good at that set of tasks that they'll make a great supervisor without, to your point, training them, developing them as leaders to understand the facilitation skills, the necessity of collaboration today. And to their credit, Gen Z is insisting on those qualities in the work that they're doing today.
Absolutely.
So
let me add one more piece to that.
Opportunity.
Yeah. Let me add one more piece to that. And thank you for that. One of the things that we're working on with organizations, with supervisors in specific, because normally we have training for supervisors separate, as it should be, than training for all of the staff. And one of those pieces is, how do you manage a generationally blended workforce? And that is a huge piece of organizational success, because whether it be the baby boomers, there's still a few of us around.
There are. More of us than
Gen X, Y, or Z. Yeah. Each one of these generations is crucial to our success. We always have to bring people in who are new and talented and innovative. And at the same time, we want to value individuals whose longevity can represent a certain level of knowledge management that can be shared throughout the organization and all the generations in between. Each one of these generations is as important as the other. And as such, if we find a way to value all of them and include all of them in this process of organizational and cultural change, then we're going to build an organization which will be seen as an employer of choice. And that's the brand that you want to build when you're competing in a marketplace where the the competition mentality is pretty fierce.
Oh, it's very fierce, brutal,
Yeah.
even some would say. Yeah, I love that. And that really is another dynamic of diversity and inclusion
Yes.
that we want to make sure that these, at least for my friend Marisa Andrade talks about working with a company that had 5 generations in
Yes.
the workforce.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that we're hearing from all them and following the
Absolutely.
conversation guidelines that you were sharing with us earlier. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Dr. Anthony Wade is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. You'll find his LinkedIn profile link in the show notes. Please go there, or just go to LinkedIn and look up Dr. Anthony Wade, and you'll find his amazing resume there, as well as his smiling face, and an opportunity to reach out to him and have more of this great conversation with him. And please reach out to him if you're particularly interested in having his company work with your company to develop the kind of positive work culture that we're talking about here today. Anthony, my guest, I love hearing from my guest about what Work Positive Nation always wants me to ask, and that is, Dr. Anthony Wade, what's one thing that Work Positive Nation can do starting today to create a positive work culture right where they are?
Right where they are. You put me on the spot here. So I'm going to add a couple. The one thing that I think is most important is to match strategy with culture. Understand what your culture is, and then make sure that whatever vision you have, whatever next step philosophy that you develop aligns with your culture. If you do, then you'll find that the culture will help support your change. If you don't, take this as gospel, culture will overshadow strategy each and every time. It's important that if people understand that, if organizations understand that, then they've got a chance at improving the culture. You don't want to change the entire organization at once. You focus on a few different types of behaviors in your culture that you want to improve on, and utilize those safe space conversations to get feedback from employees as to how to best go about achieving the change that you want, and receive the feedback no matter what format it's presented in or how it's framed. Accept it as it is, and as I stated earlier, pick out the key components, the key elements of it that align with where you want to go as an organization. You also want to develop the strengths you want to also honor the strengths of your culture. There are a lot of people who just want to say, let's throw this old antiquated culture out. It's no good anymore. Let's move to the next level. The reality of life is that organizational success that you've achieved was built on elements of that culture. And you always want to value that. You want to always honor that, especially for those generations that are there who actually contributed to that. And if we value that, sometimes we can actually use that to step up to the next level of evolution that will make the organization great. And then you can utilize formal and informal mechanisms to actually move toward change. And formal mechanisms are going to be the ones that are normally used. Surveys, assessments, those types of things. Those are the formal ones. The informal ones are those ad hoc conversations, those peer interactions, those types of things which might occur in the hallways, it might occur someplace else, groups discussions, unplanned, spontaneous discussions. But if we can take those particular informal types of mechanisms, and you combine those with the formal assessments that have normally been used by organizations, somewhere in the middle of all of that are the best solutions to move your organization forward. And again, that will be driven by our where the rubber meets the road, by our great employees that are the reason why the organization is successful in and of itself. And so, yeah.
Dr. Anthony Wade has been my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Reach out to him on LinkedIn. His profile is there. Be sure to message him and continue the conversation there. Anthony, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I know I'm better for this conversation, and I know Work Positive Nation is as well. Thank you so much, my friend.
It has been an honor. Please, love to come back anytime. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.